Hi guys, Kate here for this week's Primitive Podcast. We have Justin Noseff. Justin owns an oil-filled service company called Divine Energy. Has been running it for about 14 years, which means he started it at a very young age. Has a fascinating story, grew up in Hobbs, New Mexico. And I invited Justin on. One, I wanted to hear about his background and his story and running a company. But what I appreciated about Justin and him joining us during this time is, if you know anything about the oil and gas industry, right now it's at an historic low and going through some historic challenges. And so I really appreciated Justin's vulnerability, being honest, and taking the time to share, just from his perspective, what it's like leading a business through adversity and dealing with all the ups and downs that are notoriously true of the oil and gas industry. So I'm really appreciative of Justin joining us, and hope you enjoy his story and just, a peek inside what it's like being a part of an industry that's going through such rapid transformation right now. Thank you, as always, for listening. Really appreciate you being a listener and being a part of the Primitive Podcast. Justin, I really appreciate you being with me today. Thanks with everything that we have going on in the world and very, very likely your business. I really appreciate you taking some time to connect. And so I'd love to start out by you just kind of telling our audience a little bit about who is Justin Noseff and just a little bit about your background.
Cool. Thanks, Kate, for having me on here. My name is Justin Noseff. We have a oil and gas service company in Hobbs, New Mexico. We also have a yard in Midland as well. We provide haul truck services, forklift service, winch truck, downhole and surface rental equipment. I guess we've been doing this. June will be 14 years. So
wow, man, that's awesome! Congratulations. That's a long time for any business to be at it, but especially in oil and gas where things are always so up and down. So congrats on that. That's amazing.
Thank you. Grew up in Hobbs. My entire family's been in oil and gas, mostly on the drilling rig side. And I started working in it when I was 16 at Patterson Drilling, now known as Patterson UTI Drilling. Worked in the shop there, started driving a truck, helping move drilling rigs, and then I guess a couple years later, I had the opportunity to buy my own truck, forklift, and trailer, and that's how we got started.
That's awesome. At what point did you realize, like, hey, you wanted to be your own boss and start your own business? Like, was it just like a light bulb moment, or did you just kind of luck into it, or what did that evolution look like from going from being an employee to someone who wanted to start and run their own business?
Honestly, it just happened.
Yep. That's probably the best way, honestly.
Oh yeah.
That's really cool. So, approximately how many oil and gas downturns have you kind of lived through as a business owner? Because I think even for our listeners who aren't, real familiar with the nuances and particulars of the oil and gas industry, most of them are familiar enough with ups and downs just because of what they hear on the news and things like that. So how many kind of, booms and busts have you kind of, lived through in your 14 years of leading, Divine Energy?
Well, this one that we're in right now was making the third bust. I was 09, it wasn't too bad. And then 15 and 16, 17, and now 2020, here we go.
Yeah. What are some of the things you've learned from that? I mean, for the casual listener who doesn't know all the ins and outs of the oil and gas industry, what are some of the things that you think about when you're going through, a season like this in the oil and gas industry? And like, what are some of the things that you try to learn or you try to observe as you find yourself going through these different seasons?
Well, I think for me, I always try to learn something new coming out of it. Obviously, every industry will change, every every boom and bust, typically the bust, whenever it comes out of a bust, everything's different. Same with oil and gas. So technology obviously is a huge benefit now to where several years ago it wasn't.
Hmm.
Um, you know, people, less people want to be in oil and gas, every time there's a bust. Um, gosh, Kate, you know, times like, a bust, try not to be so worried about it. I mean, as hard as that is to say,
Sure.
um, it's more or less, you got to stay focused on what you can control today,
Hmm.
and not so much worry about the future, in a situation like this.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice, and that would be true for anyone, whether they're in the oil and gas industry going through a bust, or when we're recording this in late March 2020, and everything the economy is going through, both economically speaking, but then also just all the unknown around the coronavirus. That's really good advice in terms of you can only control what you can control, and that's a real calming effect when you really take that seriously, and that's how you approach it. Do you find that there also are a tremendous amount of opportunities when you're going through a challenge like this, or is it more of just about kind of hunkering down and trying to survive the downturn?
Well, like I said, this is my third one. Obviously, there are opportunities, but the older you get, the less opportunities you tend to see, especially in situations like this. The first one, even the second one in 15 and 16, you're kind of naive to, what can really happen, and
Hmm.
I feel like, that being naive, there's just more opportunity. So for me, this downturn, I've actually taken three of our best people and actually given them operational roles and told them, hey, you guys go run with the operation, because I feel like I'm going to be a hindrance to the company and opportunity, because I'm going to always see, hey, this didn't work last time, or this didn't, or that didn't. So I feel like you bring in a fresh set of eyes of, uh, their ability to go find what's there, and let me just kind of sit back and run the back office stuff, and let them just change the dynamics of the operations today.
That's encouraging to hear. I mean, that takes a lot of self-awareness, and it makes total sense what you're saying in terms of like the more of these you go through, the more, maybe it just changes your approach or your ability to kind of see through it based on what you've learned and what you experienced through all the other ones. So that took a lot of self-awareness. Was it hard for you to do that? I mean, you're the leader of the company, it's your company, or was that a easy move given that it was important to have kind of clear vision and fresh ideas to see how you could capitalize on this opportunity?
Well, I mean, yeah, it's hard for sure. Um, I guess I'm more, I don't mind changing things. I think change is always good, keeps people motivated, keeps people, excited about what's going on. And so, those guys that are overseeing the entire operation, they've been with me a while. So, I mean, gosh, 10 years, 8 years, and going on three, I believe. But
Yeah.
those guys, I mean, they're awesome, and they can, I mean, they're I trust them enough to go do it.
Yeah, that's
It's
awesome.
hard. It's hard though. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's good. You have a high level of trust with them, and that certainly helps. So you have around 80 or so employees. How do you see your role as a leader right now as you help lead your company, through these current times? I mean, what are some of the things that you're really focusing on in terms of your leadership and what you're trying to provide to your team right now?
Number one thing is not being, using the word concerned instead of worried.
Yeah.
Um, Even though it kind of means the same thing, I just think it comes a lot. It comes across a lot different. If I'm anxious and worried all the time, then obviously other people will be the same way.
Right.
I just feel like I said, it's me stepping back, just let me do the back office stuff and let those guys run with the operations right now. That's my main focus today. Just, like I said, Cade, a new perspective. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right, absolutely. How do you treat failure? Again, coming like this podcast is primarily about leadership and business, and so certainly whether it's in an uptime or a downtime. I mean, as leaders, we're always failing. We make good decisions, we make bad decisions. How have you historically tried to learn from failure? I mean, do you have any practical things that you do, or is it more just reflective? Like, how do you personally approach failure?
Reflective, reflective for the most part. I think you got to laugh about it. You got to accept failure. Um, I mean, if you're not failing, you're not going to change. And we live in a changing, fast-paced world right now.
Right. Yeah, that's 100% true. How do you balance all your work and your family? You've got 3 kids or 4 kids?
3.
You got 3 kids, you're happily married, you got 80 plus employees, you got 3 or 4 different locations, you got uptimes, you got downtimes in your industry. So how do you practically try to approach balancing your leadership, your work responsibilities, all the things that you face there, as well as being present and engaged with your family? What kind of approach do you take there?
You know, I take my kids to school on typically on Mondays and Fridays, and I'll try to pick them up from school on a Friday. So try to make I we have an office here in Lubbock, so I'll work out of our office on Monday and out of our office here in Lubbock on Friday as well. So that's kind of how I do it. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursdays, they can be pretty hectic and traveling between Hobbs and Midland a lot. So, um, and then just spending time with them on the weekends. Um,
Being
you
fully
gotta,
engaged, yeah.
yeah, I mean, technology today, I mean, I believe it's a lot easier today to have a work-life balance, but, um, it still can be difficult. I'm sure you
Yeah.
know.
For sure. Yeah, you have to be intentional about it. I mean, one thing I appreciate about what you said is like, you have a very intentional routine. It's Monday, I take them to school and pick them up. Friday, I take them to school and pick them up. And that's very intentional and something that you could really protect. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, or you just gotta have to do whatever you have to do to make things work. So I mean, I love the intentionality of that, and it makes a ton of sense.
Yeah.
What do you think have been some of the biggest personal influences on your leadership, whether they're books or podcasts or people or maybe even just learning experiences? When you think about your own leadership journey and who or what you've learned the most from, what comes to your mind?
Well, I think podcast. I'm not a big reader, so I'll do audiobook. But I think it's the season of life you're in. Um, one season maybe nothing but podcast. Next season maybe more audiobooks. One your next season maybe individuals. I think you have to be open minded to it, and I just think um, you have to be self aware of the season you're in and where you're gonna get the most benefit.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good feedback. If you could think back to your younger self, let's go back 14 years ago. You're working for this other company, and all of a sudden, next thing you know, you have equipment, and now you're your own boss, and you have your own business. What if you could go back 14 years ago? What types of advice would you give, Justin, 14 years ago as you embarked on, starting and running your own business?
You can't conquer the world. um, right? I mean, that's
That's true.
be patient. You know, no matter how big or small the company is, um, you can't make a change overnight and see the impact tomorrow. It takes time, um, and the more you think those changes through, the better off they are in the long run. I've learned that over time. To think, if we want to make a drastic change in operation or accounting or whatever it is, really think that through and just kind of test a few areas and see if it even makes sense. Because the more people you add to the system, the longer it takes to change, and then you end up down these little rabbit holes and you're not getting anywhere.
Right. Yeah, it's really good. I'm always really surprised at the number of people when I ask them that question on this podcast talk about patience, and so That's clearly something I think, a lot of leaders probably have to really think about and focus on. But yeah, it's hard when you're trying to make things happen and care for the business and grow for the business to be thoughtful and to be patient when you're thinking through most decisions. So that's good advice. Well, thanks a ton for being on the podcast with us. It's really great to hear kind of your perspective, particularly in really interesting, times like this where there's so much uncertainty. So, we're pulling for you and your people and for all those really being impacted by the economy and all the unknown. Your people are lucky to have you as a leader. I've no doubt you'll come out of this stronger than ever, and really appreciate you taking time today to be on the podcast with us.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Kate.
We'll talk to you soon.
Thanks.